That's our job on this planet, to create a world we can live in and that our future can live. I used to say to create a better world. I still consider creating a better world, but we've got a short-term challenge, short-term as in 30 years, which is to create a world that we'll be able to live in. Because at the moment, that's not at all certain, and that's just the job.
This is Straight Talk in the COVID economy, and my name is Larry Quick. Our world has changed and there's no going back. The COVID economy is now very real. We are adapting to telework, Zooming, online learning and new industries like PanSafe and other opportunities revealed by COVID-19. The challenges are also with us: bankruptcies, unemployment, debt and confusion. In Straight Talk in the COVID economy, we meet thinkers and innovators who bring insight and information into the opportunities and risks of our rapidly emerging COVID economy. Straight Talk in the COVID economy is brought to you by Resilient Futures. This is alongside our partner, Impact Africa Network. Impact Africa Network is an innovation incubator based in Nairobi, Kenya. It seeks to be a catalyst for the next Silicon Valley in Africa. Impact Africa Network needs all the support we can provide. So please donate at www.impactafrica.network.
I'd like to welcome a colleague of mine, Sean Kidney, who's live and well in London, UK, in lockdown. Welcome, Sean.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, listen, let me tell you about Sean. Sean, I'm not going to say this too much in front of him, but he's a bit of a hero of mine. He's an Australian, first and foremost, and he's in England, and he has been a leader fighting the good fight for using climate bonds as initiative for climate action, if you like. And I just think, you only have to, what I'd really recommend is that you Google Sean Kidney, it's SeanKidney, and look at some of his videos to see what is possible with a leader that can actually break through and make stuff happen. And that is just, it's been really hard to do that, as we all know, with climate change. But the way that Sean's done it, he's not just decided to break through environmentally, though he has been involved with Greenpeace, I think, before. He's done it in the financial services industry, and that is just unbelievable to actually achieve what Sean's achieved. So I just want to give you a quick update. Sean is CEO of the Climate Bonds Initiative. It's an international non-government organisation, NGO, working to mobilise global capital for climate change. Sorry, I should say that again. Global capital for climate change. The projects include green bond definitions and certification scheme with $34 trillion of assets represented on its board. $34 trillion. That's a lot of dollars, and that'd be US dollars. He's working with the Chinese central bank on how to go green bonds in China. Now, that's a tough market to work with, irrespective of what you're trying to do. Market development programs in Brazil, Mexico, the ASEAN nations and Africa, and market tracking services for the green bonds industry. Now, Sean was a member of the 2007 EU high-level expert group on sustainable finance, and that's one of the things we're talking about, generating sustainable value. And is a member of its successor, the EU Technical Expert Group on Sustainable Finance. He's also a member of the Green Finance Committee in China, India, Mexico, Kazakhstan. He's also a professor in practice of SOAS, professor in practice in SOAS, University of London. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. No, Larry, it's nice to see you.
Good to see you, mate.
And I admire the work you've done at Resilient Futures, and I'm very pleased to be able to talk to you today. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you. So, I thought the way to kick off, if I get my cursor working, for the context, and I'm going to try and put this idea of a COVID economy around it. Well, we see it more than an idea. We see it as emergent. It's like how business, jobs, and general money flows, etc., happen. And we're seeing what's come over the top of what we were doing before as a COVID economy. So what we're going to talk about is climate bonds. What are they? Why we should use them and why we don't use them as a first first step. You'd think if the planet was important, we'd be only using them. Examples of how they're being used, and also talking COVID economy and beyond. Inside that, how are we going to get this to happen? Because one of the things that I'm concerned about is that it's like before the GFC, we had Kevin Rudd come out and saying it's the moral issue of our times and we have to do something about climate change. The GFC happens and we all rush, as in like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to save our backsides economically. And I just wonder that in this situation, given that, you know, we had the fires in Australia, which the Royal Commission, I think it starts its first report today, actually, and it's just happened, and they're going to have to, for the first 2 weeks of the hearings, they're going to talk about the impact of climate change on those fires. So, you know, it hasn't gone away. We've got COVID-19, which is the current COVID, and the emergence of this COVID economy, and we can't forget about planetary health, because that doesn't go away just because of COVID. So that's our opening. So my opening question to Sean is, if we can start at a base for our audience, how are climate bonds, you know, what are climate bonds, the theory, the practice, and their actual application going to help us through the emergence of the COVID economy?
Well, look, a climate bond, or a green bond, as it's more frequently known, same thing, is a bond, a standard bond, an ordinary bond, a piece of debt, where there's a promise made to use the proceeds to address climate change. So, you know, you borrow money from someone else to buy a car, and you say, I'll pay it back. You know me. But the person you're borrowing the money for says, yeah, but look, I don't think you should buy a petrol guzzler. You should buy an electric vehicle for this reason. And just, you know, I'm not going to lend you the money. I'll probably lend you the money, but I'm not keen. Look, to make it easy, I'll buy the electric vehicle. I kind of want to do one anyway. I'm guaranteeing the loan, but I'm only going to use for an electric vehicle. And by the way, I'm going to turn up on Sunday week and show it to you and take you for a drive.
Yeah.
That is a green bond.
Right.
That's all it is. It's a promise to use the money in a certain way, and some rules and about transparency and reporting to make sure it actually happens, so you can trust what's in the tin when you offer to the market. So it's a very simple idea, and that's why it works, because it is not about the credit risk and structuring, because we're talking about something in the future, which is a new green economy, versus something we understand in the past in our credit histories, which is a dirty brown economy. And the two don't match very easily with the tools we use in everyday markets. Like credit rating tools look to the past to determine the credit worthy of the future, and they only look out 5 years as a rule. So we get these weird situations because of credit ratings and because of the challenge with the particular numerical tools that we're using, where Exxon can place a $12 billion US dollar 30-year bond last year and they can get a AAA rating. AAA rating, by the way, is higher than most countries in the world.
Wow.
And now that means the cost of capital for Exxon is really like this. Yeah. Now the problem with that, from our perspective on a climate side, is that guarantees that they'll continue to be producing oil way past what we know has to be the use by date of oil to achieve our climate goals. So there's two things that are not being calculated in there in terms of that credit rating with the methodology we have now. One is that there is, from an environmental perspective, we don't have any future if we keep doing this, you know, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And then the second thing is, just from a strict credit perspective, you know, if you think that governments, you know, well, let me just say, after the Paris Agreement on climate change, there is a reasonable probability, only a reasonable, that governments will act on climate change. And whilst I appreciate the federal government in the US and Australia might still be living in the Neanderthal times, most governments of the world are acting on climate change. The Chinese government, the European government, quite seriously. And those policy changes are beginning to have a direct impact on markets. And what that essentially is raising for investors is an understanding that the policy transition risk is a real risk in the future, not factored into the credit ratings at the moment. Now, I'll give you two examples of that, which is making people think, oh, hang on, I haven't got all the information I need. I've got to think about this. So solar is plummeting in price around the world and has been for the last 10 years. In places like India, 40% of the coal-fired power stations in India are running at a loss now because solar is eating their lunch by stealing their business customers with direct power purchase agreements. Because solar is cheaper now than gas or coal to install fresh in India. So India is dealing with a legacy industry base of coal. It's not really doing much more in the area, except finishing off contracts that were signed years ago. Same in China. We're actually not seeing much happening in the coal. The old contracts that were signed years ago for supercritical coal, much more efficient coal plants, are still being built, but new, there are significant government barriers in China against new coal as well, on top of this thing. So because solar is just reducing in price, it's kind of destroying the fossil fuel industry in terms of electricity generation around the world. And the only reason why there's still a market for coal and fossil fuel energy is that in the last 5 years, we've installed more air conditioning capacity in the world than renewable energy capacity.
Right.
Because in tropical nations, we're getting richer. And therefore, we want to have more cooling because it gets damn hot in Mumbai in summer. So that's the only thing that's keeping things alive. As energy efficiency gets more efficient and as solar gets even cheaper, that's changing quite quickly. What we don't appreciate necessarily is this is a result of policy transition. So in 2001, the German government instituted a feed-in tariff. This was the largest volume procurement exercise in the history of renewable energy. It led to dramatic reductions in the costs of solar. And then, about 5 years later, the Chinese decided this was what they wanted to do. They wanted to reduce reliance on polluting energy systems for air pollution reasons. You remember the Beijing Olympics, for example.
Yes.
And so there has been this massive, absolutely massive investment in solar in China since 2005,
Right.
which has dwarfed the rest of the world. And the scale of that investment, which is it was more expensive, right, than other forms of energy. The scale of that investment has driven down the cost of solar because Chinese manufacturers have been able to set up huge fabrication plants and production plants and get the unit cost down. The rest of us now are feeling the impact of that.
Yeah.
Energy markets are feeling the impact of that, and investors around the world are feeling the impact of a policy change in two governments. We're about to see the same thing happen with electric vehicles, where in this case, China, who's made its state policy in its last 5-year plan that there will be a vast electric vehicle industry in the world and China will lead it.
Yep.
They can allow the odd Tesla, but essentially all the leading electric vehicle companies are Chinese at the moment. They're investing, they've had subsidies, they've withdrawn subsidies now because they've put so much into electric vehicles, the cost has gone down. So for the most of the world, electric vehicles are already cheaper on an OPEX basis. So if you're running a fleet, it makes a lot of sense now that range is much longer. And remember, battery technology is changing like solar. It's incredibly fast. Each year, the price drops 20% and the range extends. And we've got whole new generations of battery technology coming through, many of which will not use lithium. We expect the price of an ordinary car, if it's an electric vehicle, to get cheaper than petrol in about 2 years globally.
Wow.
And then and OPEX is already cheaper. Plus, at the same time, we're moving in most parts of the world to fleets. That is, we're using what's it called in Sydney, Go-Get, or we're using Zip cars, we're using Ubers and Lyfts and so on around the world. So our driving patterns are changing towards types of driving where OPEX is more important than CAPEX anyway.
Yeah.
So you've got these changes, but fundamentally a change driven by the Chinese policy directive around electric vehicles, which is going to revolutionize the global car industry.
Yeah.
Now, if you're an investor, a big investor, this is a policy change, right? This is a policy change that is not environmental policy, which is going to have a dramatic effect on the car industry, which is not being reflected in credit ratings. So think of this as a type of ESG, environmental, social, and governance risk assessment going forward, but we just haven't been able to factor it in. Now, what that means is that when people issue a climate bond or a green bond, where the proceeds are going to something that is ahead of the policy transition curve, that is less likely to be impacted by all of these various Paris Agreement policy changes that are flowing through at a rapid pace in Europe, at a rapid pace in China, and in some other economies as well, then you've got a way of looking for things that are more future-proof.
Yeah.
And as a result, you've got this huge demand for green bonds and climate bonds. And we've been working with institutional investors around the world for a long time now, a cohort of organizations explaining the nature of risk. There are some straightforward negative impact risks as well, which you need to pick up in the resilience discussion we'll come back to. But there are, what's it called? Moral reasons and long-term assets and matching liability reasons to be thinking about trying to reduce the risk of climate change. For most investors, though, they're not going to be able to stock pick their way out of a crisis, because climate change and its impacts are a bit like the current COVID crisis. Everyone gets affected. So it's hard to know as an individual investor. We do think there are paths for investors to work together, and that's actually the whole secret strategy that we're pursuing that I will come back to. But in the meantime, you now know that you need to be recalibrating your portfolio to stuff that's got less risk.
Yeah.
If you're addressing climate change at whatever rating level you're at, AAA to D, you want to switch over to stuff which also has a bit more of climate proofing, future proofing in it.
Yeah.
And that's driven this market. And it's now $1 trillion market, $1 trillion US market, that is. It grew 50% last year. It looks like it's going to grow 50% this year, even with the COVID crisis and the collapse of financial markets for a couple of months there in February and March around the world. Because investors kind of get it, and they're using this as a tool in addition to the credit rating because of the limitations of those methodologies. So that's all it is, really. Now, of course, there's a few big ifs here. What is green? What is climate? You've got that one.
Yeah.
You've got the question of, does this have a weird effect on financial markets? Not necessarily. You talk about this as really just a different form of risk management. So from an investor perspective, at least, you're always looking for ways to better risk your portfolio. Now we come to one of the reasons why bonds are so important. There's two things you need to know about bonds. The first thing is it's the largest market. It's $100 trillion and equities are about 60 trillion. So it's more important in that sense than stock exchanges. I mean, both are important, but that's the main thing. Institutional investors, those investors that we're concerned most with, who have a regulated long-term assets and liabilities matching requirement, who are looking 20, 30, 40 years out. That is, they're forced to look long-term when most organizations don't anymore, or at least in the West anyway.
Yeah.
Those organizations are overweight in bonds. The Australian super industry is unusually light on bonds in the global institutional investors. They're like 15 or 20% in bonds, whereas in the US, they can be 60% to sometimes 80% in bonds. Ditto in Europe. I think average across the world, pension funds are 60% in bonds. Insurance industry is 90% plus in bonds. And they're the two big loads of institutional investor pools of capital around the world. So you've got to have the bond story. There's a second thing about bonds as well. Bond markets are defensive. So the CEO of BlackRock once said that he didn't make money by giving bond investors yield. He made money by making sure they never lost their money. And when people are in bonds, they're trying to lock in, as a rule, a yield for a period of time to make sure that they can get that money when they need it, and they're not going to lose money. And they're trying to. It's just much more defensive strategy, and equities are used for more offensive strategies. So the risk of losing your shirt is way, way, way more important than the potential of getting an extra shirt. And that's the difference about this game. And so given that we're actually playing a defensive strategy on climate change, they kind of match up the two issues much more. Finding short-term gain out of climate change, very challenging. I mean, you can invest in small gun manufacturers, I guess, or dredging equipment.
Yeah.
But it's a more complicated game. And, there are stories there we will talk about, because we can now foresee policy transition in many areas, thanks to statements by many governments. But you're looking to think about how you can reduce risk, hence the need to future-proof your portfolio and to try and slowly push your money in a direction which looks like it's going to be less risky. That's what we give them with this market.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Mate, makes total sense. Now, normally I'm about 1 page into notes. I'm 3 pages in. Sorry to have lost your sight. I'm busy trying to. Wow, this sort of, and I think what I've learned here, and I've got to learn more. So I'm going to most probably. I hope you haven't given me your telephone number, your new one. But because I'm hearing. What makes sense to me from a different perspective, because the issue in Australia, I mean, like Australia just it reeks of being ready for an electric vehicle, alternative energy, all of that sort of stuff. It just reeks of it, but doesn't do it.
No, but this is happening. I mean, forget the froth of federal politics. Every year for the last 8 years, energy forecasters have been wrong in their models about the energy system. Why? Because solar rooftop has continued to grow way, way beyond the expectations of the energy models. About 3 years ago, the energy companies like the AGLs and the Energy Australia started getting it. And they decided to shift to different kinds of energy strategies. And they're not interested in building coal anymore. They don't want to, which is why there was this fight around when Turnbull lost the prime ministership, because the utilities had no interest whatsoever in a non-forward-looking energy policy. That's a big change.
Yeah, we don't have
10 years ago when they were fighting against renewable energy. But they got beaten. They got beaten because solar dropped in price thanks to policy changes in China and in Germany. And because solar's got so cheaper, and because there's a whole retail market of it now, then the two things have been a real problem for utilities. One is that the capacity utilization of fossil fuel plants is way under what was expected. They're not as profitable. And the huge investment in Australia in centralized hub and spoke grids from fossil fuel plants out has been a dud. We're losing money on that.
Yeah, well,
if you look at the bulk of CapEx in energy systems in the period up to a couple of years ago, it was more in grid infrastructure than it was in renewable energy. Yeah. And that's what made life difficult. And they've realized, because every year, if you look at the curves of energy modeling versus actuals, this chunk of solar just keeps growing and growing. Yeah. And so that's energy, and that's only energy. There's other sectors as well. Yeah. The financial sector actually gets this much more. Super industry is looking for ways. It hasn't necessarily found it because there's lack of opportunities, because Australia's economy is not shifting enough because the government's not shifting it, and it's a resource economy. As you know, it's become like Argentina in 1910, unfortunately. Yeah. But nevertheless, the super industry is very keen. They've been big buyers of green bonds when they do occur. And interestingly enough, all 4 banks are now actively pursuing, all 4 major banks are now actively pursuing green finance strategies with their clients, because they know their clients, the investors, want them. Yeah. So this is sort of happening in the background, bubbling away. And in the meantime, there's this absurd froth at the top in politics.
You know what I'm just going to say? And do you know what I love talking to you? Because I don't have to talk. And I say that with great heart, love and support for what you're doing, because, I could just listen to you, without prompting, because every question I've got gets answered. And it's like a big learning. I just want to put a context to you, though, that we work with AusNet. I've worked with PowerCore and AusNet, and in the gunnels of of risk and strategy and all that sort of stuff. Now, what we're dealing with there is not they're not generators. They're not in retailers. They're wires. that grid. They gold-plated the grid, as we know. And, they're owned by Chinese companies. And if I can remember properly, when I say they're owned by Chinese companies, that SP is Singapore Power, AusNet, etc. They got a lot of investment money, I think government support in some way, by which they spent on the network. And the network, they're really risk averse in terms of generation, because they knew, if I went back in my time, they knew about smart grids. We had talked about smart grids to them and said, you've got to watch out for smart grids and how are you going to provide smart grids. They took a long road to China to find that out about, because as I believe there's a guarantee behind the government in the sale that they would never introduce policy that upset their ability to make money out of the grid. I have to go back and check, but that's the belief that I had from 2000 and I don't know.
Yeah, look, it's a regulated monopoly asset. That's perfectly reasonable for government to do that.
Yeah,
I have no problems with that.
Yeah,
so we go back again to what the government policy is that allows them to ensure they're making money, and that's the issue, right? So, look, electricity systems are not like selling, scrubbers in a supermarket where you might have a choice of 20. Because at the end of the day, there is only one grid in this place, right? So it's a monopoly asset. Yeah. Now, just ignoring who owns it at the moment and who's managed it, all you're doing really is ensuring that it keeps operating and it's not going to be pulled apart, and that's reasonable. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't care if it's Chinese or Americans or North Koreans owning it. It still operates the same kind of way.
Yeah.
The issue is the nature of the energy policy and how it shifts that. You want the grid company to make a modest profit, to get a modest return on capital, like any kind of regulated asset, in such a way it does its job. But how it does its job is something that is a product of energy policy and how you change it. Now, we've got to electrify our economies, really fast. We have to abandon fossil fuels really fast.
Yep.
And I'm not talking about 2050, which is our goal. I'm talking about 2030 and 2035. That's globally. I'm talking globally here. And we can do this. We have to reduce emissions 50% in 10 years to have even a sparrow's fart of a chance of avoiding utterly catastrophic climate change where the human species may not survive. Yeah. Let's be clear about what's at stake here. And I don't care a fuck what some politicians in the federal government says. What I care about is what the climate scientists say. And we have ignored climate scientists for the last 30 years. And we've kept saying, yes, we'll get to that. But, we've got to worry about this. Guys, that time's gone.
Yeah.
The latest thing we've seen from the International Panel of Climate Change's 1.5 degree report in 2018 is that unless we get 50% cuts in 10 years, we're toast. We're toast.
Yeah.
We are talking about the best trajectory of no changes, as if we don't get it, something like 4 to 6 degrees Celsius warming by the end of this year, in my view.
Yeah.
We are talking about pandemics galore. There's going to be pandemics, which I'll come back to too. But we're talking about much more serious ones, because that's what happens when you mess around with climate really substantially. And we should expect to lose 1/3 to 2/3 of the world's population this century.
Yep.
Can humans survive at all? I don't know. We're already now have higher levels of GHG concentration in the atmosphere that humans have ever experienced since we became a species. We do not have experience of living with this level of GHGs in the atmosphere. And it's 415 now. In 2100, we are talking about 1,000 ppm. That is more than double what we have now. And we do not know whether humans can even survive, at least without mutating. And that's probably not enough time to mutate in that kind of time frame. I can tell you one thing, though, which is ironic about this, is that, when you've been in a meeting room for 3 hours, if the air conditioning's not working and everyone's a bit groggy, well, that's about 800 ppm. Imagine the whole planet like that.
Yeah.
Humans' brains work much more slowly in that kind of environment. We get stupider. So the big irony about this is the more GHGs you put in the atmosphere, the stupider we get. Guys, we've got to fix this before we get so stupid we lose the ability. That's really
right now. What you're really saying is that Tony Abbott and his bunch of +4s have been sitting in rooms without the air conditioning on.
I don't know why or what, but I will say this. People who have opportunistically and knowingly been ignoring the science are a bit like people who choose to ignore the engineering report on a new bridge. And then the bridge collapses and a couple hundred people die because they're on the bridge at the time.
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation, Larry? You actually try people for criminal negligence.
Yeah.
And frankly, we need to kind of understand what's going on in that kind of framing.
Yes.
This is not about opinion, guys. This is formal scientific advice, which is universal. Every single national science academy on the planet backs the International Panel of Climate Change. No matter what some ignoramus who managed to get a TV camera says. You know, there is absolutely no doubt in the science. There is doubt about exactly what to do because this is uncharted territory, what we have to do, except that we've got to get emissions down. Now, so we have that level of certainty here. We have probably more certainty around climate science than we have about gravity, to be honest. So in that circumstance, what do you do?
Yeah.
Well, you're being told the bridge is going to collapse if you build it that particular way. In fact, you're being told the bridge is built, you've got to renovate it. This is what we're really being told. Otherwise, it's going to collapse. You listen to the experts, guys. This is what it's about. For the last 30 years, we haven't. We have to now. And I'm just telling you that if we don't listen to the experts, hey, it's all risk. The bridge might not collapse. It might survive, but odds on we're going to be wrong. We kind of got to act. And that's really what we're facing on the planet. Now, the question we're talking about now is how to change things and what the mechanism is. So Australia, because of the lack of policy at a central level, is becoming a consumer of what happens around the world. Okay, c'est la vie. It's not a big economy in terms of emissions production. It's everyone's got to do their extra percent. Don't get me wrong. It is criminal negligence. I will say that. But it's not going to be where the world is going to be won and lost. That's going to be in China, India, the US, and Europe at the end of the day. So Australia will be a receiver of this kind of stuff. I mean, yes, Australia does supply coal to the world. This is a bit like the narcos in Colombia. Yeah. We are the heroin producers of the world now. We've got to understand that. And by the way, a lot of people in the world see this as Australia. This is not funny, guys. This is true. We are continuing to generate vast coal mines like Adani, where we are feeding the very industry that is killing us. And there's a growing number of people who understand this around the world. And this is a real bummer for Australia's diplomatic position in the way the world is going the next few years. But hey, you don't stop cocaine by shutting down the cartels. We've learnt that the hard way. Same principle. I don't expect to stop Australia exporting very easily. The key is demand. Well, actually, Australia's not on top of what's happening on demand. I work in China a lot and India a lot, and I can tell you air conditioning is driving the incremental increase in demand for the moment, but that's going to change very, very quickly because of reductions of renewables, because of different kinds of energy and so on. Both those countries have their energy systems are in its period of turning like that. And it's slightly bizarre that we're not picking this up yet. You know, India is saying it's going to be banning imports of coal from overseas. That's what the minister says. I don't quite understand how the Australian government still thinks it's worth subsidising Adani. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, have you not met your counterparts in India about this? You know, but look, you know, Australia will be a consumer, and unfortunately, because Australia is not developing technologies for the future, is still mining resources of the past, and we kind of abandoned the idea of an elaborately transformed manufacturing sector in the 1990s under John Howard and the Liberals. We kind of said, oh, no, we'll just be miners. It's all cool. We can make a lot of money out of that. We've been hollowed out. And that makes us much more prey than we would otherwise be to the vicissitudes of global resource changes. Luckily, we're diversified. You know, we have a lot of industries which are going to be part of the new economy, the lithiums, the cobalts, the rare earths of the world. So we can probably survive the collapse of coal and then gas in the 1930s and be able to shift onto other sectors with a bit of difficulty. But you know, if you want an economic policy in Australia, you should have an economic policy that looks at how to use the human capital we have and create export industries that are based in the cities, because that's more viable long term. We know that that's the Argentina in 1910 when resource prices collapsed. Argentina went from being the wealthiest country in the world to way down the list, and it's never fully recovered. I worry this is exactly what's going to happen to Australia. But hey,
let me just put something to you in terms of COVID economy, because the government has pretended, and I'm saying that, I don't want to go on about that, but if anyone's listening that wants to argue the pretended to do a stimulus to actually hollow out the drop caused by COVID-19, this particular COVID. And the reason we call it a COVID economy is because we mostly should call it a pandemic economy, because COVID that we're experiencing now is going to come back as a COVID or other mysterious mutations or that type of thing. So it is a way of actually working in highly exposed pandemic environments, which completely changes. I say, Sean, we're a square metre people economy. How many people can we put into square metres, whether you're a restaurant, a pub, a bus, a transport, or an office, or a footpath, or whatever? It's all based on people per square metre. When people per square metre have to social distance, the whole business model collapses in terms of how much you're getting paid for commercial spaces in particular. Not so much in domestic, but definitely in commercial spaces. So hence what happens is that has an immediate impact on how many freeways we need, how much transport we need if people are going to work from home, which, a prolonged period of work from home has already produced some pretty startling results in terms of the growth of a teleworking mindset and skill set. And, that's what we're going to keep. Most of the people that we work with, big companies, say, we're going to keep people at home at least until December. We might have a look then. Well, that business model then changes. So, we've already got one client who's already gotten out of the lease, saving $500,000. Small financial service companies making $500,000 a year, getting better productivity in their case. And it doesn't work for everyone, but the flow-on effect from that is immediate. Commercial space is already got some problems, say, in Melbourne, in terms of maintaining rents and all that sort of thing. So what you've got is a twisting economy that's happening, and it's shifting. We did some work. I was on the what was it called? The National Telework Committee back in 2013. And it was just amazing what was discovered, because I'd done a little bit of work in the US on what would happen if a little village, people work from home in this village in the east coast of the US. It was phenomenal, just 2 days a week, what it would do for local, distributing the economic wealth out into these places that were less risky, particularly if you used online. In 2007-8, they did that. It was like, oh, no one's got the NBN. They had, in America, we were doing it on the East Coast, they had black fibre, dark fibre going all the way up the East Coast that had been dumped because someone went broke, but it was there to be used. And they had a whole bunch of what I call transactions happening on the road. You don't need to do those transactions by transporting people. You do it by transporting bits of data. So we've actually flipped to that model. So we're not necessarily as abundant in our square metre economy. And the people are occupying homes, and some of them having problems with a whole bunch of stuff. But generally speaking, not everyone, but there's a large chunk of people will not go back and populate the dense cities that we have. So it shifts the economic landscape. So what I'm saying is that, the normal stimulus that would be done here is that you would build infrastructure, because everyone knows economics. If you're going to stimulate, you build economics. So, you had if you're going to stimulate something, you build infrastructure. And you just look at all the emphasis on shovel-ready product projects after the GFC. And I'm not too sure that is going to work, because like what we're hearing is, well, we've got to get a stimulus package to get us driven out of this. So it's a bit like this, we're going along like this, we're fluttering a bit like that with a very fragile economy in Australia. And then this happens and, well, bang, we dive. They bring in something that does that, supposedly, and it's suppressed by, suppress the economy, suppress the COVID-19, the virus, and you suppress the economy because people can't, they've got a social distance and all that, square metre economy, doesn't work. But they've suppressed it, and now they're wanting to come out. What they're talking about is investment in infrastructure. Well, you know, what type of infrastructure will that be? Because our business now, generally speaking, is in digital. So, you know, does that mean we're going to make the NBN work, you know, compared to what it was supposed to be? Does it mean that we will not invest in building more freeways, maybe finish the ones we've got? You can't have half a tunnel. But, you know, one person quoted to me some figures on that we won't need another freeway in Victoria for 100 years based on traffic flows during COVID. And not just flows, it's how it flowed. The complex system that traffic is just worked differently. And, you know, the trains have been running with no one in them for a long time, and we don't know.
You know, I sort of agree with you, but I also think we don't know. You know, the humans have an extraordinary capacity to forget pain. I mean, otherwise women wouldn't keep having children. Let's face it.
Well, maybe women know how to forget pain.
No. Same happens if men and they break their arms too. So just not as extreme. That's all.
Yeah.
So, you know, very soon afterwards, our brains are wired to forget the pain we've had and to move on to what we were doing before. And I'm sorry that as much as I would quite like what you're talking about, because I think it would be a much lower carbon economy,
it will be.
I'm not convinced that we will see such drastic changes over the period, and past crises, including in the 1918 Spanish flu, would suggest that that's unlikely to happen, that we will have changes. So now, I've spent the last 2 months on webcasts or web meetings like this, and I do think some things will stick. I hope that there'll be more working from home, for example.
Yeah.
And I hope that internationally there'll be more collaboration. It's also, in terms of if you're trying to create an international community, there are some benefits to not being in an office of a team, because everyone's on a level playing field when you're all coming in via the web. So, you know, you can be a colleague in another country and a colleague down the street, and you're all the same. And these are positive developments in terms of developing international collaboration and the global way of working that is absolutely critical going forward, which I'll come back to again in a minute as well. So I think that, but equally, young people especially really value the physical and social company of being close. And I think that will quickly, especially if young people who forget even faster than us oldies, will revive. So my feeling is it's not at all certain what will happen 2 years and 3 years out. In 1 year, we'll see a lot of failures. We'll see a lot of bankruptcies at this time, which is unfortunate, and governments need to decide how they're going to support that. Let's call this a transition space. But transport getting up, you know, I'm sort of not convinced about that. I mean, we do kind of need to change our transport system, and we need to shift to electric on everything. But shifting just to electric cars, and of course the suggestion, the implication of what you're saying actually is that if you are going to commute, you might be more likely to commute in a car than a train at the moment because you're worried about the virus.
Yeah,
and I think that's true.
Exactly what's happening.
I think that's true. But once the virus is gone, you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised at how quickly that writes itself, I have to say. Well, there may be some changes. We might move to small electric buses on roads. I do agree that building new freeways is relatively unlikely, but for a multiplicity of reasons, not necessarily just because of COVID, because of what traffic there is. I think we'll actually shift back to high-speed rail. And I'd say I've been rather shocked at looking at the tube in London in the last week, because we still are, you know, seeing 400 people die a day here at the tube in London, when the government, with its sort of confusing signals about what we're all supposed to do, said some of you get back to work. They're packed in the morning. People are standing like sardines again, no face masks. And I'm thinking, geez, that is short-term memory, right?
Well, just let me hold you on that thought. Just let me hold you on that short-term memory. I don't disagree with that. You know, cognitive dissonance is a real thing, and human beings are wired to the past, not necessarily, not predicting the future, or, you know, just having a foot in the future. That is, and if you have a foot in the future, at least you've got a foot in the game. But let me just sort of push back a little bit to say, you know, on the Spanish flu, completely different environment to now. Spanish flu was a less connected world. It was, in fact, it was not connected. The transaction, how long it took to do a transaction during the Spanish flu time was like a long time. You couldn't catch a plane to America or to England in 24 hours. The amount of connectivity from the internet is obviously global, and it's sort of like transactions at almost the speed of light. So, you know, when people say to me, Spanish flu, I go, yeah, different time, different place. And, you know, that was a shitty bloody flu, and primarily created because we had, you know, it was the end of the First World War, and a lot of soldiers came back with it. But, you know, there wasn't a lot of transmission from a pandemic point of view created by, say, tourism or business travel or all those sorts of things, the transport connectivity. But what we've actually seen, and it's really happening in terms of the advantages, and they're just opportunities that are popping up of telework in organisations and how it can work is quite startling as we see it.
It's lucky this didn't happen 10 years ago. It's true.
Well, put it this way: 10 years ago, when I was working, it was going to happen. That's why the Labor government at the time, just happened to be Labor government, had the telework industry. The telework department in federal government, and that was funded totally by industry at the time because they were looking for savings, and it was totally funded. The Liberal government closed it down. Even they said we can't afford it. Well, they weren't even paying for it at the time. I'm not having a go at any party here, but that's what happened, and it was cast off out into the boondocks, you know, as far as the department went or the unit went. There had just been a study done by the City of Sydney, I think it was at the time, that totally blew open the need to have big investments in city infrastructure and what you could save socially, economically, environmentally by having a portion of the workforce decentralised. And that was just ignored, put away. Now, you know, the lady that I work with, she basically had to give up. She had a lot of information but no interest, no supporters. So
change is often like this. It doesn't happen smoothly. It happens in step changes. We're in the middle of a big step change. There's no doubt about that.
What we've got is like, you're being sent home. Now we've got it and it's there. And it's like saying there's a risk in sending you back. But, you know, the productivity issues are coming up. Now, what we're seeing that the organisations we talk to are saying, if only we had someone to help, if only we had someone to help. So we're seeing the telework industry sort of maybe starting to be cobbled together as bits and pieces. That is an industry worth investing in some shape or form to support the 20 to 25% that won't go back to the office. But once again, that 25% reduction in square metres means that the space and the rentals you're getting are unviable, as it is at the moment. It's unviable to open up a hotel right now.
Well, it's unviable if you're paying back the capital cost. It's true. If the original shareholders get wiped in a bankruptcy, then you buy the building, you can probably make it work.
Well,
so,
yeah.
You know, capitalism has a, you know, the Schumpeter's destruction.
But the flow effect. I know we're getting, I want to get to this, this point on Australia. Mm-hmm. And just there's, I'm going to put this together in some sort of fashion, but you've made a couple of comments because I want to talk about the bond market. We're 15, something like, our super organisations 15% into bonds, insurance 90%, the average is about 60%. We're globally more than likely investing in the wrong things. We don't have an energy policy. We've gold-plated a network, a grid system that's in the wrong place because, you know, the Yarra Valley, not Yarra Valley, wherever it is, they put the big, you know, this is where our coal mine is going to be, and that's obviously where you put a power plant because next to the coal. All of that sort of stuff means the grid is in the wrong spot. That was the big
But Larry, these are not big problems. Honestly,
no, they're not.
We make bad investments all the time, and then we write them off. That is the weird beauty of capitalism that eats its own lunch, which is the system we have now.
Yeah.
And we have lots and lots of write-offs. Sometimes it might be 1%. Sometimes it might be 15% of an asset base. This is what will happen here. In fact, energy policy is de facto in Australia more often than real because of what's happening in solar.
But you're saying what we're being driven by is overseas policy.
Correct.
Making us work in a certain way. So, I can get that we don't need to have an energy policy. It can be de facto.
Oh, no, we should have. No. Sorry, I'm not letting people off the hook.
Yeah,
I'm just saying it's not the end of the world.
De facto. But here's the thing: when we come out of this, what is the government going to invest the big bucks in? Is it going to invest in building, buildings and stuff like that. And,
Yeah, that's what it should invest in. It should invest in energy efficiency and in systems to reduce power use. That's what it should, because that'll create jobs.
That's what I wanted you to say. Now, Ross Garnaut, you know Ross, he's brought a book out called Superpower.
I'm a big fan of that book and hydrogen as well, but it's not a big jobs economy. It's a high capex, low opex investment structure. So yes, that is a resource play.
Yep.
And so on the resource side, they're the things we've got to be doing for the future.
Yep.
On the job side, we all live in Australia, we live in cities. We need to be looking at things in the short term to soak up unemployment from the hospitality industries, the retail industry, and truck driving industry, by the way.
Yes.
In most states in the US, I discovered yesterday, the biggest class of workers are truck drivers.
Yep.
And I suspect that's the case in lots of parts of Australia as well. And if we do see less trade in the short term before it picks up again, we've got to give people jobs in the short term. And the way we've traditionally done it, and we can do it again, is to boost construction, but not necessarily new homes here. The job is to retrofit and get energy bills down. That should be the job for the next year, and we can create a lot of jobs.
We move out of that. We can be building homes, and I don't think that's a problem if we're investing. And to a certain extent, the government's investing by giving larger dollars for first-home buyers to keep the building industry.
That's actually a silly policy, but there's other ways of doing it. But
I understand why they're doing it.
That's how you inflate house prices.
Good or bad. But the thing is that if the $500 billion, maybe $1 trillion in some shape or form, it's going to be invested to go forward, is it going to be an economic stimulus that actually makes sense around planetary health?
And that's the issue, right? So you talked about COVID as being a bit separate from climate. I'm going to give you an alternative narrative here, Larry. The reason why this pathogen, we now know very clearly, jumped between species from bats in a very stressed ecosystem to humans. The International Panel of Climate Change Health Committee, led by an Australian for many years, in fact, has been saying since the mid-90s that we're going to see a century of pandemics this century because of degraded ecosystems as a result of climate change and fragile and collapsing ecosystems.
Yes.
Because that's what happens when ecosystems collapse. Yes, pathogens happen to jump between species, and including challenges of humans as well. So we need to look at this as actually the first big climate shock that we're going to have. And there'll be many more, some of which will be fires. The fires we've had in Australia are not the last time it's going to happen. It's going to be a regular feature of this century. Floods. We had floods immediately after the fire in big chunks of Australia. What we know with absolute certainty now is that the climate's going to change from being slightly more level rain and fall to Sydney-style southerly busters all around the world that dump rain and then lots of drought in between, pretty well everywhere. Boston in Massachusetts is having to widen its stormwater drains because of how rainfall is going to hit in the future.
That goes all the way through New England.
Correct. So all of these things we now know are going to happen. We do know that change will not be linear. The change will come in shocks. And then after each shocks, there'll be a whole lot of unforeseen changes, which is what you're positing in terms of the economy and so on. And I don't disagree with your discourse. I'm just saying we may bounce back more than you think in some areas, but there'll be another shock later. So we will gradually shift. So all this is going to happen. So we need, so just on the first point, just imagine, just not imagine, understand that we will have a century of pandemics, let alone other shocks. So this is not so much something we have to recover from, it's something we have to quickly learn from to prepare for the next one. So how we manage our economy out of this resilience, how we build resilience, resilient futures, to use your company's name, now is the game. Is the D game. And there's two kinds to that. So one is first an understanding that resilience, which has been characterized largely as infrastructure resilience. And there's been a lot of good work done at a state infrastructure level in Australia on improving the heat, flood, rain resilience of infrastructure already, if you like. But we now need to understand that actually your health system is part of resilience. Your social protection system is part of resilience. Look at how the US is learning the hard way that if people can't go to their emergency clinic without paying money when they're ill with a pandemic disease, they simply won't. And in fact, they'll have to keep working because there's no employment policy of note for large slabs of the population. And what do? You guarantee the pandemic gets worse if you don't have those things in place. So these now become climate resilience strategies. And then secondly, if you are listening or reading what the IPCC is saying, you know that the other thing we have to do is to inoculate against really catastrophic climate change by reducing emissions 50% in 10 years, guys, 10 years. That's 7.6% per annum reduction in emissions globally that we have to get. And who's got to do better than the others? The rich countries. So we need to be getting a lot more in Europe and Australia. Europe started last year, 5% reduction in emissions, damn good. Now it's got to double that, and it knows it's got to double that. And Australia needs to be doing the same. And that's not about just making sure the world doesn't get too hot and we can't go swimming in January anymore. It's about avoiding catastrophic changes, including much greater frequency of pandemics. That's what it's about. And this is the big learning. So this year, for anyone who reads the science versus listens to their mate down at the RSL who doesn't know anything about it, then you understand that this is what we're doing now. So yes, there's a whole lot of changes arriving out of this COVID, which will come through. Maybe as extremely hard. I don't really know. What I do know is everything we do now has to be about preparing for the next time, because I'm going to tell you, there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever there's going to be more of these. No doubt whatsoever. Now, whether it's 3 years, 10 years, or 20 years, I don't know. I hope it's 20 years. I really do. But it will happen. And we need to understand how our systems work and how we respond. That's exactly, and how we can prepare for this kind of the new volatility. We have created a norm now, a new norm, which we have not experienced while humans have been on this planet, which is a climate with enough GHG in the atmosphere that it guarantees a much higher level of weather and climate volatility. That's essentially it. We can't escape that now. We're just on a race to stop it getting really, really bad. Guys, learn. This is it. And we're running this real life human experiment at the moment, which is kind of useful. So many countries around the world are having different policies, different health policies. And I'm going to say Australia and ScoMo have performed fantastically in terms of actually the dealing with the crisis. So lessons to be learned for the UK, that is now the second largest per capita death rate in the world after the US. Whether the US can learn lessons on that, we'll find out on the 2nd of November. But there are lessons that we're learning because we've got this live experiment of all these different ways of dealing it around the world. If you want to know where to do this best, you're going to go to South Korea, Taiwan, New Zealand. They're the people who've done best at managing this stuff. And now we've got to take it everywhere. Now the recovery is the same thing. How we recover economies that are punctured, well, we've only had a pretty trivial reduction in terms of recession in Australia and New Zealand and Taiwan and South Korea. The big recessions are going to be in Europe and the US, and then in emerging markets like India that are only just beginning to feel this thing. There'll be two different recovery lessons. One is from the modestly impact ones, how to recover, and then the deep impact. The recession in the West is going to be the worst recession in 300 years in terms of collapse of GDP. That is saying something. Now, luckily, we're all Keynesians now. We've learned that lesson from 2008. So I think we should be able to create a lot of jobs quickly to get people digging holes and filling them in again. So we've got some level of unemployment going on, which is why sort of not too worried about what the capex looks like. I want it to be green. All I know is we've got to have a lot of investment in the next year to recover, to make sure people are in jobs. Otherwise, we have revolutions, right? The single prime determinator of war in the world, the only reliable indicator is the level of unemployed young men.
Yep.
So we've got to get those young men to work and give them a future quickly of some kind.
Because I've spoken to you before, and now what I've got to do, and you make me do it, is I've got to go away and process, because I think we're saying, in many ways, we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, we are.
A little bit of a counter swing, because you've got a global view of what's going on in the financial market. I'm sitting here in Woodend, and I'm Australian looking out, and I get as much. That's why I talk to you, or people like you. And I've got to process. Most I can process as I'm talking, but with you, I can't. And I process pretty quickly. But I want to end on a question. I think you've given. I've said 3 or so specific ways for our audience. In terms of COVID, the COVID economy gone. And the reason why we frame it as COVID, so people can get their heads around it. We've talked about climate economies before, and the people that have to make the decisions don't engage as much as you talk about the COVID economy. Hang on, I want to know more, because this shit's going on now. So, but I want to ask you one question, and I'm going to come back to you. We're going to do this again, I hope. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. What if you're going to invest in a stimulus coming to get us out of the COVID economy? What would it be? If you're going to, if you're the federal government and you had the purse there and you said, "I'm going to invest in this," what would it be?
Well, there's not a lot of doubt, right? And we've done a lot of work in Europe around a taxonomy of sustainable finance. That's been one of my big projects for the last 18 months that the European Commission published. It is a procurement plan for the future. It's as simple as that. It's 80% of what you need. We've still got work on the other 20%. So that gives you a starting point. So there are 3 things we have to do. So clearly, we have to invest in jobs, because the people who suffer are the people who lose their jobs who are fragile, in the fragile businesses, hospitality, retail, truck drivers, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And they don't necessarily understand what the hell's going on. All they know is that some bastard has sacked them and there's no work coming through, which is fair enough.
Yep.
And there's going to be outrage there, as there should be in all of this. We've got to support them. So we have to create viable jobs, come what may. But while we're doing that, we cannot afford to create jobs in all sectors of the economy that have to go if we are to inoculate against catastrophic climate change. Yep. So we've now got to look to 2 things about where we create those jobs. First is stimulating the economy in a way that hastens its transition to being low carbon and climate resilient. That's the first and most important filter. And
low carbon filter, and climate
teasing
resilient.
Out the resilient. And the second filter, in terms of teasing out the resilience, is creating systems that will be able to help us the next time a crisis comes along. And that might be, if you take jobs, it might be building an empty ward on the end of hospitals that are called fever wards, which is what China and Taiwan did after the SARS crisis. Yeah. Stay there as redundant spaces that when a pandemic hits, can suddenly got capacity to put people into beds in hospitals. So there's a whole bunch of things where you weave these things together, and you're looking in all of these, which ones are going to give you jobs fast. And so if you're going to look at jobs fast, there is no doubt in the way we currently construct our economy, it is construction. Let's keep it low-level construction, energy efficiency improvements to houses, cheap loans, mandatory municipal schemes to get your energy bill down is the sales line for this. Your bill will go down, plus we're going to create jobs for the young people in your municipality, in St Kilda or wherever. It's part of this. So that's step 1. That's what you get going. There are a bunch of other sectors that we can also do. We can do land use management schemes. What we did do in the 1930s, we had tree planting schemes. Guys, it works. We've got to increase global tree cover by 50%, especially in tropical zones, to be able to soak up carbon out of the atmosphere. We can do that with major replanting schemes. I have to say, we have to be careful. They've got to be run by the likes of CSIRO, because a lot of replanting schemes fail but we have the knowledge. We have the knowledge there in Australia. We just got to listen to the scientists. That's all I'm saying. And we can then massively increase forest cover. Hey, plantation forest helps too. So, we can make part of this an industry, but forest cover. Environmental remediation, where we've had land which has gone bad, if you like, because of poor land use practices, including using European livestock and Australian livestock. We can change that. We can invest in that now. We can build infrastructure for water resilience in places because we're going to have more droughts and more storms. Well, this is job building exercises with a lot of construction involved in it. Solar does help. Solar creates a lot of jobs in the installation phase. So we could, much more so than other forms of energy generation use. So we could have a focus on an even more significant rollout of solar in the short term in areas where we haven't done it. So these are all examples, they're just examples of things that we can do to create jobs short and sharp and quickly whilst we recover the fundamentals of the economy. And that's what we have to do. Everything needs to be about resilience and green, low carbon and jobs. Put the three together, there's a hell of a lot of options for us.
Mate, that is so good to hear. And let me ask you a secondary question. Do you think the current political forces will think that way? Or just say that a yes or no, or on that, or maybe, or you'd hope. That's what I call a Ross Garnaut approach, who never ever gets upset when he puts a bushfire report in front of him 10 years ago that says 2020 is going to be the time we're going to have catastrophic fires. They ignore him and he comes back and say, well, it would have been a good idea if we'd done it differently. Lovely sort of temperate response. But, so a yes or a no or a maybe, but what...
Look, I'm not a commentator on domestic Australian politics, I'm afraid. So I can't, my views are the views
if the government doesn't do it, what can the people do?
But I think the federal government has actually done better at coordinating during the COVID crisis than, say, in the bushfire crisis, it looked like for a while, and done better than a lot of other countries. So it is possible that they will understand what's got to be done in terms of job creation. It's possible. The state governments have actually been quite good in many areas. I mean, I think the WA Premier is the highest rating Premier in the country at the moment because he's very strong response to COVID, and he gives every indication of understanding the economic rebound aspects about all of this. So I'm modestly positive. I mean, the states, as well as the federal government, the states have deep lending capability, very high credit ratings. So, and I can tell you that international investors like sovereign and subnational debt, which is going towards addressing climate change. I mean, we did have two states that were blacklisted by the Swedish central bank last year, who said they would no longer buy their bonds because of their very poor climate policies.
Who was that? Which states?
If I remember, I'm not quite sure which two states it was, I must say. Probably Queensland and WA, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But equally, they will invest again if those states issue green bonds to finance a green recovery, without a doubt. And there's a lot of investors will pile in. So the investment community is really there. I mean, we've already had green bonds issued by Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland. There's, by the way, I don't know if you knew, Larry, but there's 15 billion Australian of green bonds that have been issued in Australia. So it's, it's already got going, if you like. So this is an easy thing for governments and subnationals to do as a way of raising necessary capital finance. That's option A. Option B is they look at the regulatory settings and the various kinds of fiscally efficient measures they can use, like tax write-offs for certain sorts of activities, to encourage the private sector to do it, and that'll happen as well. So there's a whole toolkit there to use that we've used before, haven't necessarily used for green before, that we can use. So I don't think it's hard, this sort of stuff, in principle, once you look in the right direction.
I think we have abundant skill set to do what you're talking about, abundant action ability to get things happening quickly. My question is, and there was an interesting, I don't know if you caught Four Corners, not tonight, obviously, but last Monday night, and the manipulation by the media, one media being a Murdoch, or the Australian, and it was a report by the ABC in Fairfax on Australia's manipulation of media to directly hinder climate change action. I think, you know, we're talking about a mindset here, and I don't think the people have never, well, not in pre-COVID, 2019, the fires, they were ready to go during and immediate after the fires. It's going to be interesting to see what the right wing of the Liberal Party does, which is basically attached to a climate change is crap, Tony Abbott comment, view of the world. It'll be interesting to see if the government can rethink itself in terms of mindset to get behind a climate change economy through the necessity of a COVID economy. Because planetary health has got to be a number one. And that is, you know, in the short term, they're not looking at necessarily recycling or all that sort of stuff. They're looking at how do you work social distancing. Well, I can't go to my brother's funeral or something like that, which is totally understandable. But I just think that, you know, I hope you're right, Sean, that the government can get logic in this. And I think that's one of the things you bring to this argument of climate change. It's not an argument anymore. It's the conversation or the narrative that there's financial and economic sense in investing in climate change.
You know, you've got some peculiarities that a federal front bench or federal government here, like some countries do. You know, there are many countries that have had capture by factions. The UK is one where, you know, curiously enough, the government exiled a whole lot of really senior members and former cabinet ministers and chancellors of the party when it first came in, and now it's dominated by a particular faction, in this case, Brexiteers. Yeah. So this is not unusual in politics. On the other hand, you've got some very interesting state members. The Liberal Party in New South Wales has been very good on climate policy recently, so it's not endemic to the Liberal Party. Yeah. And it's certainly not endemic to the right. It's certainly not endemic to the right. I mean, in Europe, honestly, this is like a bizarre argument because the right and the left are absolutely on the same page in terms of what's got to be done. They have different views of policies, which is what you'd expect and what's appropriate.
Which is healthy. It's healthy in terms of execution.
Correct. It was Theresa May, the Prime Minister, the last Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who pushed through a 2050 net zero carbon target for the UK, for example. Yeah. It wasn't a Labour Prime Minister or whatever. No, I think this is an aberration of history.
We don't have that voice, and I think we lost that voice when Turnbull was overturned by the far right, you know, and you can name the people, you know, it's the
look, Turnbull is bitter about that for good reason, I think.
Yes,
for good
absolutely.
Reason, because he knew the issues. But, you know, frankly, Larry, it's a failure of the left. It's a failure of those voices who do understand. Politics, you know, people have to win the politics as part of winning everything.
Yeah.
Finance and business are changing already. You know, when I spoke to when I shared a panel with the former CEO of AGL not that long ago in Thailand, he was saying to me he could not. The reason he resigned was it was unfathomable the stupidity of the policies that were being pushed upon him, like build a new coal-fired power station. Yeah. Just, you know, there was no business sense in it.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think there are many forces that are going in the right direction in society. It's you know, if you don't react, then you're going to be left in the dustbin of history. I'm sorry, that's the way it's looking like. And it's in the interests of everyone in the economy, for yourself, for your friends, for the likes of me and what I'm doing, to work towards the change that we know is necessary and to make sure those elections are won. When I'm in the US, I say to the climate advocates, look, you know, don't forget you've got to win the 2nd November election if you want to have a climate future.
Yeah.
Because there are some people who, you know, who may be very well-meaning and have a view about what's going to happen, but they don't have access to the information, the science, for whatever the reason, and they're taking a different direction, which is positively harmful to us. I mean, this is equivalent to the risk that Lindbergh would have won the election in 1940 rather than Roosevelt. That would have changed the course of history.
Yeah.
He was a pro-Nazi. And we need to understand that politics is a field of decision. And we do change our future with the decisions that we engineer through elections and through changes of governments. It doesn't guarantee a change in the future, but if you don't make sure that part of it works, you can guarantee a future won't change the right direction. There'll be a negative consequence. So, there's no doubt that participating in the political life of your country, whatever system you have, and this, I'm just saying this applies in China, right? China is full of green finance and climate change activists that are working within the nature of their particular system to change the government and having a fair degree of success. They are activists. They are still activists. Everywhere activists play. So just because you don't have the kind of circus-like elections that we have in Australia, usually fought over trivial issues or diversionary issues, doesn't mean that there isn't a live body politic where there are issues being discussed and fought. And it's really imperative for all of us to do what you're doing with this project and so on, to argue the toss and to campaign for change and explain to others. That's our job on this planet, to create a world we can live in that our future can live in. I used to say to create a better world. I still consider creating a better world, but we've got a short-term challenge, short-term as in 30 years, which is to create a world that we'll be able to live in. Because at the moment, that's not at all certain. And that's just the job, folks. And if the fools are in charge of the larder, then that's our responsibility to fix it.
Mate, I just want to say thank you so much, because just listening to you, it's like wisdom of a high order, coated in lots of beautiful information. And I want to thank you so much, and see you soon, because I've just got to process all this. It's 7 o'clock at night here, and I don't do well after 3 in the afternoons at times. I'm a morning guy, but it's your morning, but I could listen to you all night, but that's not a good thing for you starting the day. So thanks very much, and we'll speak again soon. Thanks, Sean Kidney.
Good luck with the fight, Larry.
Well, you'll be involved. Don't worry. See you,
Thanks,
mate.
mate. Talk to you again.
We hope you've enjoyed this Straight Talking the COVID Economy podcast. Thank you for listening. And please subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. For more information about Resilient Futures, please visit www.resilientfutures.com, and please support our partner, Impact Africa Network, at www.impactafrica.network. We need all the support we can to help them build their own incubator. We know that there are many other great podcasts out there, and your time is precious, and you chose to listen to Straight Talk on the COVID Economy. And we appreciate that. Thank you.